All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this session. We'll do a few housekeeping things, but just to make sure that you're in the right session, this one is going to be how to plan an event for your student organization. So if you're like, oh, shoot, this is the wrong one for me, feel free to jump out now. No hard feelings. So we will go ahead and get started. I know it's been a long day. You've eaten lunch, and if you're anything like me, this is probably like Saturday afternoon, you're ready for a nap. So I'll try to make this fun and entertaining and fast. That being said, I do still want to cover any questions you all have. So feel free to throw those in the chat box. I have an awesome moderator. Her name is Forum Patel. You may know her. She's going to be helping me out with those questions. So either she'll just respond to them in the chat if she knows the answer, or she will feed them to me throughout the presentation. I also wanted to make sure that everybody knows that this is just like a regular Zoom meeting. So you do have like video and mute and unmute. It will be recording, so just as a heads up. And then if anybody needs the live transcription, we should have that option available as well. So those are kind of a few housekeeping things. Remember, we will count attendance, so you will need to actually pay attention because we're going to send the link at the end and you'll only have a few minutes to click it. So make sure that you're paying attention for that as well. All right, well, to get things kicked off, my name is Jessica Mode. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Student Activities Coordinator and Student Involvement. So I like to say I have the most fun job in our office because I get to plan tons of events for you all and for students across campus. So I'm hoping that I can teach you how to do that so that way you feel confident planning events for your student organizations. So let's start out. If anybody feels comfortable in the chat, if you want to just say, have you ever planned an event for your student organization? I'd love to hear about some things that you all have done, or if you haven't planned one, maybe something that you're hoping to do for this upcoming year, just to kind of get, you know, a feeling for what you all are wanting to plan for your organizations. Feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll kind of shout some out. I know that there are lots of different ideas, both virtually and in person, that people are hoping to plan for the year, especially because we haven't seen each other all in person for a while. So I'm sure that there are lots of ideas out there. Nobody has any? Okay, bonfires, hikes, trivia nights. I love those. That sounds super fun. Well, feel free to throw those in there just so other people can kind of get some ideas. But we'll go ahead and start out by some ideas that I've thought of. So planning a virtual game night, whether it's like bingo or it could be Jackbox is another popular one, just so that way everybody can come together and see each other virtually is a cool option. A lot of events like to host guest speakers, maybe on a trending topic that relates to your kind of area in your student organization. Self-care events are also popular. So like creating your own bath bombs or having like a spa night or something like that can be fun. If you're interested in learning or teaching a new skill, especially for maybe like academic-based organizations, you guys could all listen to a TED Talk together and then discuss it, lots of different options, or always plan a team bonding event. An escape room is a fun one that we've done in the past. I oversee the university program board, so we've done that and had a lot of fun with that. Awesome, and it looks like there's been a couple other people that have done trivia nights. JASA did a lot of online events last year. So this is awesome. Thank you all for sharing. Okay, now you'll learn that event planners are very organized. And I know not everybody will be organized, but let me tell you that being organized up front and having some organization when it comes to planning your event is going to make your life easier in the long run. It doesn't sound like it, but you're not going to be like scatterbrained on the day of event if up front you take some time and kind of make a checklist. So we're recording this session. You can always access it later, but if you want to take like a screenshot or use your phone, this is kind of my overview of the checklist that I use every single time that I plan an event. So look at this. We're going to go through these one by one, but this is kind of your 10 simple steps to programming that you're going to do every single time. I see a question that, will we have access to the presentation later? Yes, Michaela is going to send you a link to all the presentations that happened today. So just kind of keep an eye out for that. All right, so the first thing we need to do is think through our program goals and objectives. Usually when we're planning an event, we have to have a purpose behind it, right? Either it's like team bonding, or we want to promote our organization to other people. We want to all hang out at a bonfire. You have some kind of reason or purpose for planning it usually. So I would, get together with your student organization, think through, talk about those goals, and then also think who's your target audience. This may be people in your organization, or like I mentioned, maybe you're recruiting people, so you want to kind of branch out. Either way, this is going to come back because if you're targeting a certain group of students, you're going to need to market to them. So it's better on step one to kind of think through who those folks are. And then later down the line, you'll already have that kind of all written down. And then one important thing that you'll always need to think of is, how is this program contributing to the purpose of your organization? Obviously, you all have mission statements and reasons for being an organization at UMSL. So kind of tie that back to your program in some way, and hopefully you can teach people that come to your program a little bit more about your student organization. Okay, so budgeting, I know we've had 2 sessions on budgeting, one that's happening now and one that happened in the last session. So hopefully either you or your treasurer or president attended one of those, because it's going to be important to request your budget. You are going to have to think through what you're going to need for your program. So this kind of comes during that first step when you sit and talk to your group. You also need to figure out, what supplies are you going to need? Are you going to have to pay money to have a speaker come in and talk to you? Are you going to have to print flyers for your event? All of that is going to add up, and you're going to have to submit that in your SABC funding request. So think about it kind of beforehand. You should all know that the SABC funding can be submitted on the finance tab. So if you need to know more about that, definitely ask Kenny. He's the man with all the answers in terms of SABC funding. All right, so to give you kind of an example, I actually like to break down my budget and see kind of each line item, how much it's going to cost. So I have an example on the left-hand side for a salsa dancing class. If you want to contract somebody to come in and teach the dance class, that's going to be $300. For this salsa dancing class, we don't really need any supplies or anything like that. So that item or line item is $0. And I like to include it just so that way I know that I've kind of thought through those details and know that I don't need supplies. Your room reservation might cost $100 if you need AV or something like that. And then $40 to maybe print some flyers, some stickers, whatever you may need. This exercise seems kind of like, why would I need to do this? But it's really going to help you also think through your logistics in terms of what you're going to need during the event. And, if you want to hand something out, like hand a flyer out after the event to say, hey, here's when our next salsa class will be happening. You'll know in your budget that you're going to have to print those flyers out. So again, you can kind of start to see that all these steps that I'm talking about, they all kind of flow together and will help you feel organized and make sure that you've pieced everything together. So something that I like to think about in terms of budgeting is just, how much are you spending and is it worth it? So, if you're bringing in a speaker that costs $2,000 and you're only getting 2 people at your event, is that really worth it? Because you're basically spending $1,000 per student. So make sure that when you're spending money, that you're also doing work on the marketing side to get enough people there, so it makes it worth your time to put together the event and the money that you're spending on it. All right, so next is the logistics step, and this is kind of where we think through, like, who, what, where, when, why. So the date and time is going to be super important. You want to consider what your program needs are, who's coming to the event, before you decide the date and time. If there's key people that need to be there in your organization, make sure to consult with them and check that the date and time works. And then location is also important. So where do you want to host it on campus? Do you want it to be virtual? Those are all options. And if you went to the last presentation, Josh Gibbons showed you how to reserve a room in the Millennium Student Center. So if you need any help with that, just reach out to us and we'll kind of help you get settled in terms of that. Another thing I like to do is look at the My Engage calendar. And that's just myengage.umsl.edu/events, and make sure that you're not overlapping with like another student organization or maybe like a big event that student involvement is hosting. You know, a lot of us are trying to pull for the same students to come to our events. So it doesn't really make sense if we put a lot of events on top of each other. So just glance at that to double check and to make sure that, you know, nobody else has a huge event during the time that you're wanting. And as far as event spaces, obviously the Millennium Student Center is a great option. We deal with like a lot of student organizations, so we kind of know how to handle the requests that you all are probably wanting. But do know that you can also use the rec center. I think you have options to go to classroom buildings, outdoor lawn spaces, and of course you can always do Zoom or like YouTube Live or any of those virtual options. All right, so once you have that figured out, you have your room reserved, everything looks good there. Now it's time to start kind of making the practical planning steps of what else needs to be done. So most likely you're not going to be planning this event by yourself. Hopefully you have some friends and folks in your student organization who are willing to help you. So what I would say is kind of make a master checklist of different steps that you need to complete and make deadlines for those. So then when you meet with your student organization and Forum doesn't have her part done, I can say, well, Forum, we made a deadline, so, you know, why isn't it done? Can you get this done ASAP? And it kind of holds everybody accountable. I know that's what we do in our office and it's worked really well. And then if somebody's struggling with their deadline, you can kind of jump in and help where is needed. I also, in my checklist, like to include any post-event steps. So say after the event, you need to email the speaker and just send them like a quick thank you note or a thank you email. You can make sure to include that. So that way, after the chaos of the event comes and goes, you still know that you have to do that. And then you'll also want to think through your day of event setup. So on the day of event, you know, if you get there an hour early and things start going crazy, like people show up to your event early, maybe a speaker doesn't show up, things can kind of get a little crazy. So I like to write down my day of event schedule, including like what happens at each time. So say you're coming at 10 a.m. for setup, and then at 10:30, your speaker is going to arrive, and then the event actually starts at 11 a.m. You can have all that written down so that way everybody in your student org can kind of be aware of what is happening throughout the day. I also really want to stress to you that it's super important to get contact info for important people at your events. So a speaker or a vendor who's coming to help you, you need to make sure that you can have some hopefully cell phone number or something to get in contact with them, say if they show up late or you know, if there's a weather change and you have to move the location, it's important to have that information so you can kind of get a hold of them in case there are day of event emergencies. All right, so we've been talking a lot about your entertainment and your speaker at your event. You all have the option to bring in people from outside of campus, on campus, to help with your events. But most of the time they do want to be paid for their services. So don't worry if you've never done this before. Our office can help you kind of get this all set up. So my coworker Blake is actually the one that is going to be dealing with all the contracts for student organizations. So he'll kind of take care of that for you in terms of getting the contract signed, and we have our legal team look over it to make sure that everything looks good and there's something in the contract that like the university doesn't agree to. But it would be your job to get in contact with Blake and make sure that that process goes smoothly. I will say that this does take a bit of time, so make sure to do this at least 6 weeks in advance to make sure that you can get the vendor paid on time and we can get that contract signed and good to go by your event. And then this is also a good time to kind of chat with your vendor to see if they need anything during the event, since you'll already be talking about contracts. You know, if they need a certain AV setup or they need to eat lunch in between like one event to another event, it's kind of a good time just to chat with them so that way you're familiar with their needs and you can work around that for your event. The only time that you won't need a contract is if you're not paying a vendor or you're not paying people that work at UMSL. You won't need a contract then, but in most cases, I would just suggest consulting with Blake, and Michaela can get you Blake's email if you need that, so feel free to message her about that. But this is just kind of a way to make sure that the vendor has what they need and that the university is protected. So that's kind of why we do contracts and work with that. All right, so how is everyone feeling? Is that making sense so far? Do you all have any questions? Now would be like a great time to throw them in the chat. We kind of have a minute before we get into some more things in the checklist. All right. Okay, so let's chat for a minute about your food and program supplies. This is something that you're also going to have to request in your budget. So think through what food and what supplies you're going to need for your event. Sodexo probably needs at least 5 weeks in advance. It just takes some time when you email Sherry at Sodexo to kind of get your items priced out. And if you have any special accommodations, just in terms of like you want something that's maybe off the menu, they can definitely do that, but it's going to take them some time to price it out and, you know, just make sure that your order is correct, they know where they need to deliver it and everything like that. So make sure that you're kind of ahead of things and that you don't do it like 2 days in advance because they're not going to be able to fulfill your order. You'll also want to think through the program supplies that you need. So I'm trying to think of a good example for this. Maybe if you're doing like DIY bath bombs, you'd have to either purchase kits or supplies to make those. So that would be something that our office could order for you either off of Amazon or from another store, but you will have to request that in the finance tab of your organization portal. Okay, so at this point, you basically have your event planned. Everybody has kind of been allocated what they need to do. And you really just need to focus on marketing your event so people actually come to it. Now, I oversee the university program board, and they program about like 30 events per semester. So they do a lot of marketing. And I can tell you that that UPB and myself can kind of get like, all right, I'm getting tired. I don't really want to market anymore. Like, does this step really matter? Just because, you know, at this point you've planned a whole event and you can kind of be tired. But trust me that this step is like super important, because if you don't market, people aren't going to show up because they're not going to know about it. So here are some of my favorite ways to market your event. I know in the first presentation, Katie Gertler, our media producer, talked about art requests and like digital signage and the rotunda banners. So those are something that you can always have and that are super easy to just submit, and you'll get those. But a couple other things that are pretty easy to do are make sure that you put your event on the My Engage calendar. we've been training people over the summer who have come in from orientation how to use MyEngage, and we're really making it a point to make sure that students know that MyEngage is kind of like the place to go to look for events. So make sure that you're putting it on that calendar. It's a really simple process that Michaela showed you this morning. It takes about 5 minutes. Of course, make sure that you're sharing it on your social media. I will say that while I think social media is important, it is only getting it out to a limited audience. So, make sure that you do it, but that all of your marketing isn't on social media, because then people who don't follow you are not going to see it. And obviously, like at this point in the semester, we really want to reach out and get new people into our organizations, which means that they're probably not following you on social media. So you want to do some other things like talking about it in your class. A lot of professors, if you just ask like, hey, could I hand out a flyer or could I make an announcement before class? I found that a lot of them are willing to do that. So you're welcome to ask there. Just tell your friends. There's a lot of power in word of mouth marketing. So make sure that you share it with friends and that they can spread it to other friends. If you have group me's or like text chains that you can just throw it in, I think that's kind of a nice way to market, and it's pretty easy. And of course, don't forget that student organizations have the option to table either on the bridge or in the rotunda. You do have to reserve that space with the MSC team, but that's a good way, especially during these first few weeks of school, to kind of get out there and promote your org to different people that are walking to and from classes. I don't know if anyone else has other suggestions in terms of how to market or how you guys have marketed in the past, but I'd love if you could throw it in the chat, just because, like I mentioned, marketing is something kind of the more creative you can do. I think the more different people you can reach through that. I know like TikTok is big. So even like if you create a TikTok video and share it on like Facebook or on like an Instagram reel, I think there's some value in that as well. Oh, this is really good. So Japan America Student Association has a Discord server. So I'm guessing they just kind of add all their members in there and then they use that to market. Great, so keep throwing them in there. I see that we have a hand raised. Okay.
Yeah, I just have a question.
Sure.
To put like the chalk paint on the windows on the bridge, how do we go about requesting how to do that?
So I'm not sure if that's an option anymore. They've been kind of picky about who they've allowed to do that. So I would reach out to Josh Givens in the MSC and see kind of what the policy is now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. But that is a great example of creative marketing, and I think something that not everyone thinks of. So that's like definitely the right direction to go in terms of, thinking outside the box and doing something that not everybody does. All right. So now that you've marketed, you're confident that people are going to come to your event. Now is the time to confirm everything on your end. So I say 1 to 2 weeks in advance. This can even be a few days in advance, kind of whatever you think you need for your event. I like to keep a document of if you all bought anything, which I know our office is going to buy it for you, but just like a confirmation of like what supplies you've bought, if you've had any emails with your speaker or your vendor that's going to come to the event, just so that way you have everything to kind of like cover your butt in case anything goes wrong. You can be like, well, nope, I have it right here. And we can hopefully, when you keep these confirmations and if you bring it to our attention, we can kind of help you work through maybe those roadblocks as long as you're doing this a few days before your event. So this is kind of your last chance to tie up any loose ends you have on your to-do list and just confirm that everything looks good for your event that's coming up. And then once your day of event hits, this is kind of your day like to be on, you're ready, you know that you've confirmed everything. I always suggest probably about 30 minutes to an hour before your event, arriving early and setting everything up. This is obviously going to vary depending on how elaborate your event is. The more elaborate, the more time you'll need. But just get there a little early so that way like students aren't showing up and being like, oh, who's coordinating this? There's no like sign saying what event it is. There's nobody here. You know, you want to look professional and make sure that people are like, oh, wow, this organization is on it. Like, I want to be a part of it. You know, if you have any of those confirmations, you might want to just bring them with you to the event. That's important. Like if there's a contact phone number on there, you'll know that you have it. And then I would also make sure either before the event or on the day of the event to kind of assign roles to everybody. So if you have one person that needs to do check-in, maybe one person that needs to help your speaker get ready, one person that needs to kind of like walk around and make sure everyone's doing okay. That way everybody has their own roles and they kind of know what their part is in the event. And then the final thing is just that things are probably going to go wrong at some point. And by wrong, I mean like just not 100% to your plan. And that's okay. We kind of had an example of this today in Seoul where our form, we thought everybody could log on and make sure that they could track their attendance, but then something in the settings was messed up. But that's okay. You know, there's ways to quickly fix things, but the big thing is to make sure that you're calm and your team is calm. So that way somebody can kind of handle the situation quietly and get it fixed. Now, I did want to chat about check-in just for a minute because if any of you are participating in our Commuter Cash program, which for those of you who don't know, Commuter Cash is a program that's hosted by student involvement. And it's something that we put on to just encourage commuter students to come up to campus and get involved a little bit more. So Commuter Cash is basically, we have a whole list of Commuter Cash eligible events. And students can go to those events, check in, and then every time they check in, they earn bucks, which is basically like fake money, which doesn't sound cool. But the kicker is that they can spend it on our end of semester auction, which we have one in the fall and one in the spring. And at this auction, they can basically bid on items. We give away TVs, Apple Watches, AirPods. We've done like blues tickets, lots of fun, like big ticket items that they can bid on with the cash that they've earned throughout the semester. So if your organization is wanting to be part of this Commuter Cash, we've been doing it for a few years now. So there are some students who are like, I am going to every single Commuter Cash event because I want to get as many bucks as I can. It could be a good way to help promote your organization's event. So if you're wanting to be a part of that, you just have to make sure that your event is free and that it's open to everybody. So even if it's like an accounting club event, but you're not going to say like, oh, if you're not an accounting major, you can still be part of it. That's free, even though it's accounting. If it's open to everybody, that would still be eligible for Commuter Cash. So if you're wanting to be part of that, it's really important to make sure that you check in attendees because that's how we track everybody's bucks. But also for your organization, it's really important to track attendance because a lot of times a SABC request is going to ask you, you know, how have your events been doing? Have you had success with them in the past? And so if you can go into My Engage and say like, oh, during our last event, we checked in 20 people, they're going to be like, wow, this organization has had really successful events. And it's just going to help you kind of prove that, you know, you're using the money wisely and you're spending it wisely. That being said, even if for some reason you only get a few people at your event and you are planning for more, we're not going to hold that against you or anything like that. It's just kind of good for, you know, tracking purposes to keep count of these numbers. So that way, we can either help you with your marketing strategy or kind of just know how many people have been attending the events for the purpose of your org. So in order to do this, that was kind of a long-winded explanation, but you'll need everybody who comes to your event to download the Cork app. So this should be available for both like Android and iPhone users. All you have to do is download this app and log in with your SSO ID. At some point, it asks you to like choose the campus. So you can choose the Umslow campus, log in with your SSO ID, and then you can pull up your event pass, and it literally is just like a QR code. And that's how student involvement will scan you into events. And that's how we're hoping you all will scan your attendees into these different events. So that's what your attendees will need. As far as what you all will need kind of on the back end, you're going to need the app that's on the right-hand side, which is the Campus Labs check-in app. And this one is kind of the back-end way of how you're going to scan people's QR codes for check-in. So what you'll need to do is download the app, and then it's going to ask you for an access code. And this access code can be found on your event that's on the MyEngage calendar on the back end. So make sure that if you're using this check-in process, that you are adding your event to the MyEngage calendar, because you will need that access code, and there's like not any other way to get it. And then from there, literally you can just scan your attendees' Cork pass, or if they like forgot it or haven't downloaded the app, you can also enter their email in, and that works as well. And those are all going to be ways that you can check people in.
I have a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I work in the Veterans Center, and we're trying to do like a back-facing event where like we kind of manage our data that way with like people who check into the Veterans Center. Can we use that app as well? And it links with MyEngage, so we can like get that data of who's coming in and when. Mm-hmm. Or do we still need to do like the MyEngage thing where we just have our event and people swipe their student IDs?
We'll have to sidebar about this after, because since it would be like a reoccurring thing, that's kind of where I get hung up. I'm not sure if there's a way to do that, but I think we could look into that and see if that would be possible. Because the main purpose of this is for like a one event, like kind of one-off thing, not like, oh, we're trying to track people every single day. So sidebar with Michaela and I about this, and we can try to help you to see if there is a way like around that. All right, so perfect. So then the last step is kind of your evaluation step. And this is where you sit down with your organization and see, how did our program go? With every program, you're gonna have things that went awesome that you wanna repeat if you ever do the event again. And you're gonna have things that you're like, well, that didn't really go so well. Totally fine, that happens with all of my events. Usually during the event, I'm like the weirdo who's on my phone, like emailing myself notes about like what to do better next time. So this step is important just because, you know, you always want to see how you've done and ways that you can improve, especially if this is an event that you're going to continuously do year after year or every semester, which I know a lot of our organizations do. So sit down and just see, you know, what went right, what went wrong, and did we have like enough volunteers? Did we market well enough? These are kind of all questions you want to ask yourself just to see and to improve for next time. And then like Michaela mentioned, on MyEngage, you can also send people a survey after, it basically like triggers the survey to be sent after they've checked in on that Cork app. And you can do like a short survey to ask them questions. So that's also an option if you want to do that. All right, so that's all I have as far as my checklist goes. What other questions do you all have? Okay, so we got one question. They said, let's see. They said, I was trying to find the code for the campus labs and on some of my events I didn't see one. Do I get a code for this if I already made the event a Commuter Cash event, or can I only see them the day of? So that access code that you'll need for check-in should be there immediately once you've created the event on MyEngage. You have to go in, so when you go into the event, you can find it on the calendar, and as long as you made the event, you should be able to go in and hit like manage event and see everything on the back end. So I think that there's a tab, it's called, let me see if I can just pull it up for you really quick, and I'll just show you all. For those of you who are not interested in this, Forum did send the attendance link. So you're welcome to kind of head out, but let me, all right, let me show you this on my Engage. So if you go to an event, I'm gonna pull up the campus resource fair since this is my event that's happening on August 31st. You'll see this like manage event tab. You'll click this. And then here you will do track attendance. Oh wait, just kidding. It's right here. It's under this event attendance. It's this access code that's literally right here. So just 2 steps. You can copy it. Multiple people can be checking in at one time. So if you have that check-in app and 2 other members of your organization have the check-in app, you guys can all enter this access code and be checking people in at the same time. So if it didn't show up, I'm not really sure why. You can send me an email and I'll throw my contact information in the chat as well. So if you all have any like event planning questions, you're more than welcome to email me and I can kind of help you out and answer some of those questions for you. All right. Well, that's all that Forum and I have. So if you all have any questions, we'll hang out for a few more minutes, but I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon.